Good evening. My name is Mozart Gelly. I'm the executive director of 21 Progress. 21 Progress is a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington, focused on developing the next generation of leaders in our community. We do that through various ways, through mentorship, through community education, and civic advocacy, where we make sure that the voices that are heard in the media are the voices of the people who are most impacted by issues of immigration, economic justice, and social change. Fundamentally, 21 Progress believes that if we want anything to change, it's going to require a different kind of leader. Leaders who believe in our creativity, leaders who believe in courage, and leaders who care most about their families, their schools, and making sure that everyone has access to dignity at work as well as at home. This is the first event of our fall series. We have another series called Rise, where we bring together community leaders, really in the spirit of how do we wake up together when oftentimes when we read the news is oftentimes this happened today, this happened today, this happened today. This is a remix of that, where we're coming together in the evening after a long day's work to really come together in a casual conversation with leaders in our community who want to talk about and are interested in talking about how do we shape our region, right? What will it look like in the next 5 years and 10 years when it comes to who will be in seats of power, and how will we make sure that those folks in seats of power reflect the values that are most important to the people who are here tonight and the people that we care about. This series is filmed by Ambassador Stories, a community-based organization and company that has done incredible work in the community as it relates to communities of color and their stories. And we also believe that in partnership with Ambassador Stories and the speakers you'll hear over the next few weeks, that through storytelling, that's how we change history. And that by changing history, we can actually change the future, right? And this project is funded by the Neighborhood Matching Fund, and we're really excited because we're fortunate enough to be situated today in the Chinatown International District, which is a neighborhood that has always fought to make sure that everyone's story is heard, particularly from the API community and more broadly when we think about social change work. I hope you folks enjoy this experience. I hope it inspires you to take action in your community, whether it's volunteering, making sure you're going out to vote. It's being recorded today in October, so there's for sure in this country a desire for change and an interest in figuring out how do we make sure that the political offices that are present all over the world and in this country and in this region reflect the values of the people who live in those places, right? That there's a match in some way. With that, I want to transition to our speaker of the night. Toshiko Hasegawa is a fourth-generation Seattleite and a lifelong resident of the Beacon Hill neighborhood in Seattle. She was appointed by Governor Jay Inslee as the executive director of the Commission on Asian and Pacific American Affairs in October of 2018. Previously, she worked in legislative government at the federal, state, and county levels, where she worked with communities to pass policies related to immigration, labor trafficking, police accountability, and criminal justice reform. Toshiko is passionate about civic engagement and spends her free time volunteering for campaigns for political candidates and initiatives that match her values. Toshiko also served as the president of the Seattle Japanese American Citizens League, which was recognized in 2014 and in 2016 as a chapter of the biennium for outstanding efforts and participation in social, civic, educational, and legislative activities. Toshiko takes pride in engaging diverse communities in conversations regarding issues and policies that impact them and enjoys being present in the communities she serves. She holds a BA in criminal justice and a BA in Spanish from Seattle University, where she's currently pursuing her master's degree. I'm really excited to have Toshiko with us tonight. I think she models humility, patience, and thoughtfulness that we're describing. And with her new appointment at the state level, I hope we can hear more about what her values are and what she hopes for, both from her past experiences as well into the future. So please help me welcome Toshiko.
Well, thank you so much for the honor of inviting me here to speak with you all today. Hearing my own resume, it's like, hearing somebody list off all the accomplishments, right? But what you're not doing is listing off all the failures or the challenges or the things that it took to overcome to achieve those accomplishments. And indeed, I think that probably one of the most important things I've ever done in my life is fail. because true winners know that the harder you fall, the higher up you bounce back. And that's what it's all about, is always taking it to the next level, right? So let me fill in the gaps of the resume. Like Mozart said, I'm a lifelong Beacon Hill girl. 4th generation, we call ourselves Yonsei. The word is Yonsei in Japanese American. And I went to Garfield High School. What people might not know is, they look at Asian women and they might just assume that we've always had good grades, right? But that was really not always the case. I was always smart. The report card always said, talks too much in class. Like, really, I was truant. Okay, like I'd been in trouble, I'd been suspended from middle school, I've been suspended from high school, I got emergency expelled from high school. Junior year was truly a traumatic time. And you don't give yourself enough credit for the wisdom that you truly have in your core and that you're able to express at such a young age. And if I could go back in time, I would tell that younger woman in myself, you're right. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're right, right? And I really wasn't even ready to go to college. I, in fact, was completely intimidated by the notion of going on to higher education. In fact, we nicknamed the North End the no-no because it wasn't for me. I couldn't imagine going to UW every single day. And so what did I do? I had one of my biggest blessings, and it's a privilege. I had 2 wonderfully loving parents who cared about me and supported me. They had a Get Fund for me. It's where you buy tuition at the current level for that year, and then once your kid graduates and they can get tuition for that same price. Well, I took that Get Fund and I fled the country. Then I went to Costa Rica. That's where I learned Spanish. I did my healing while I was there. For some of the things that I had experienced that just needed to be internally worked on. And sometimes what I believe is it takes wisdom to know what you need, but it takes courage to actually go out and pursue it. So I did that. And when I came back, I was ready. I was ready for college. What I was at the time, 19 years old, was I was registered to vote. Because I had no misconceptions that you have to engage the system in order to change the system. So because I was registered to vote, I was summoned to jury duty. And when I was summoned to jury duty, I was selected to serve on a trial. And that trial was for a 15-year-old Micronesian boy who was being tried as an adult for attempted murder. And in that space, I learned for the first time that perspective that I took for granted, that I just thought was common knowledge, it was actually incredibly crucial for me to be there. Because they're trying to say that he was a gang member for having a red hoodie that matches red gloves, that matches red forces, and we all know that you go into anybody's closet, you're gonna find that. And it was important for me, because in that space, for the first time, I realized I can't take my own voice for granted. In fact, this world needed that voice. And that's when I was applying for college. So I applied to criminal justice, and I was accepted, and so began my career into criminal justice reform. As soon as I graduated from undergrad, I had a hell of a time getting a job because it was the recession. And so knowing that I was raised with a value for service, I actually decided to just volunteer at the same time as working in the restaurant industry. And God bless the restaurant industry because it was what I needed it to be, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I needed to serve in the other way, right? The one that goes beyond when people cash out. And so that's when I decided to get in touch with the Japanese American Citizens League. And what it is the nation's oldest and largest Asian American civil rights organization. You see, both my grandparents passed away before I was born. And there's so much that's lost when you don't have the chance to connect with your grandparents. And connecting with the Japanese American community in that way was a way of connecting with my own personal history in a way that I didn't think was humanly possible. And it was the most important thing I ever did to go hyper-local. Because once again, it lets you know exactly where you're at and it calibrates you, and you know what your mission is. There's no deluge. You just go forth and you go and pursue your personal legend. I love the Paulo Coelho book, and he says that when one goes out in pursuit of their personal legend, the universe conspires to help you achieve it. And when I went out to go serve and address the pertinent civil rights issues of today, I knew that I was doing exactly what I was meant to do. Eventually, I knew that I wanted to work in government, and it required taking a big risk. See, my father always taught me, what you do is you build your toolbox, right? You take experiences here and you take experiences there, internships, right? Fellowships. You volunteer here for all different kinds of things. You just see what you like. It's like dating, right? And you know what you like, you know what you don't, and that's before you really commit to something. But I knew that I wanted to work in government, and it required for me to take a risk and quit my job. And because the way I imagine it is, you know that feeling when you're standing at the end of the T docks, right? And you're looking at the water underneath you, and you know it's the middle of winter. Maybe not everybody does this, but the water's cold, right? And you're just hyping yourself up to go and take that plunge. That moment, I don't know if it's excitement or I don't know if it's sheer fear, but I live for that leap. And if there's ever a time where I need to leap in order to gain, then I'll do it. And so I just wanted to express to you all that it's not always going to be easy, and it's not always going to be comfortable, and it's not always going to be as clear or seamless as the finished product that we decide to post on Facebook about, right? But the world is full of helpers. And every time that I've had, and I think it was Maya Angelou who put it this way, she says, I've had a lot of clouds in my life, but for every time there was a cloud, there was a rainbow. And sometimes the best thing that you can be is choose to be the rainbow on somebody else's cloudy day. And I think that's what we live for. It's because we're all a part of something much greater than ourselves. One thing that I've learned about being a young woman of color who's carving out space for herself in something as dense as a political landscape is that just by the way that I look, there's going to be a little bit of assumptions, right? And it's always off of superficial assumptions that it becomes far too easy for people to dismiss us or delegitimize us as an intelligent, capable, talented force to be reckoned with. And one of the first ones that I encountered pushback on was my tattoos. I'd be walking down the hallways, tattoos ablazing. They say, oh, here comes trouble. Causing any trouble today? Are you going to stay out of trouble? And I just thought to myself, why does everybody associate, why people keep asking me about trouble? Like I didn't get it. And somebody told me it's because of the tattoos. Look, I'm glad to sport my tattoos because I'm hoping that people will ask about them. And so I'll offer this up before we transition into the next phase. What I have inked on my wrist is a Japanese idiomatic expression. It reads, okage samade. Okage means shadow. Sama is like a pronoun, but for the most highest description of respect. It is in honor and respect of the shadow. It's the notion that we are a product of what those who came before us did. I am who I am because of you. And I know that as a fourth generation Japanese American, as a woman of color who can vote, who is appointed by the governor as executive director of Kappa, everything that I have and take for granted today is because someone along the line, they fought, they bled, and they sacrificed. And we cannot take that for granted. So at the core of everything that we do, as much as we can talk about how much we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps to get to where we are today, we'd be remiss not to talk about the collective fabric of society that worked and advocated so that we might be in a position to take it still further. So yeah, without further ado, thank you very much for opening the space for me to share today.
Really excited to have you here as our first speaker. As Mozart mentioned, this is our new fall speaker series, and really with the hope that we can bring together local leaders, emerging leaders from our community, and really make sure that we're creating space for people to come together and talk about their shared lived experiences, advocating for safety, for equity, and really about creating rights for everyone in our local communities. And with this, we'll be discussing how we can shape the direction of leadership in our region, strengthen our community by supporting the next generation of leaders, and really think about what we talk about here at 21 Progress is how do we uplift people's purpose and passion and power as we try to fight for equity. So for the Q&A, we'll start off with a few questions and then open it up to the audience because we really want to make sure that this event is really informed and centered by the community. So as we talk through different stories, if you think of questions, please save them towards the end and then we'll open it up for that. Toshiko, we talk a lot about defining moments in our lives, but we don't often know when they are happening in that moment, right? We look back and we say, this is a very important moment that was pivotal, that was transformative in some way or form. When I heard you speaking about the jury case that you were on, it sounded like that experience was really meaningful to you.
Transformative, yeah.
What about it was most impactful?
For me, that experience, I think in and of itself, just the fact that it was so memorable, it speaks to what a milestone it was for me. Like I could tell you the inside and the outside of that entire case and exactly where I witnessed specific injustices that at that point of the process I was completely powerless to control. For example, when you're brought in for jury duty, your only option is to say whether or not that person did it. You don't actually have a say in how severe their sentence is going to be. And that boy ended up being convicted as a child to 15 years in adult prison. And it was an incredibly dark feeling, and to know that even now today he's still there. But the other thing about that process is that it stimulated me, like right at the level where everything that was going on, I was tuned in. And all my synapses were firing off. And I started thinking not just about this case, but about, the whole system, right? And I think if something grips you that way and it entices you on a psychological, emotional, and even even a spiritual level about just what does justice look like and what is my role in all of this, I think that's a really important thing to be able to pay attention to. It's interesting because I think a lot about that as a transformative experience, right? It changed my life's trajectory. And I think a lot about change. And we're always becoming as human beings, and we will until the day that we die. Right now, I'm going through a whole bunch of transitions. A whole bunch of transformations. And I'm getting married in 2 weeks, for example, right? I'm in the midst of getting my master's degree. I'm in the middle of a career change and taking on a new role on behalf of a new organization. And I think of change as this process of stretching and remolding and stretching and remolding, and I was thinking about change, and you can either resist it or you can embrace it and choose to grow with change, and that's a hard thing to do. All the changes I just listed for myself are changes I opted into, but sometimes change happens to you. And I realized the last stage of change, that snap, it's the destruction of the old. And I think the best description, the best metaphor I could offer is that of the butterfly, right? And you emerge, and it's not the same. and you think about where you came from, and you pay it so much honor, you pay it so much respect. But change itself, I don't think it has to happen over a long period of time. I actually think that transformative change for many people can happen in a moment. Who's fallen in love? You can raise your hand.
Oh.
Yeah. I would argue somebody could fall in love in a moment, you know? Change can happen in an instant. So it's an interesting thing to be in touch with when it's happening.
Thanks for sharing that. I heard first you speak of that moment to you as something that was so compelling that there was no other feeling or ways in which you could act to then change. You know what happened after that jury case. So I think about compelling moments and then almost like the wholeness, which you've been saying about people and their leadership. And so one of the questions that we had is around lessons. And you spoke to this a little bit around challenges being the greatest gift that we learn versus just a long list of all of our wonderful accomplishments, which still are very valid and powerful, right? But when we think about lessons, what took you the longest to learn?
My mom says I learn everything the hard way. You know what? And I'll preface this by saying that we can't get anywhere all by ourselves, right? We have to work collectively, and collaboration, especially strength in numbers, is such a key piece to being able to take the vision forward, because we are inherently tied to each other. I think millennials understand that in an intrinsic way better than any other generation does. We're the single most empathetic and compassionate generation, and we inherently understand the concept of intersectionality. And not just that, but we're able to put an actual vocabulary to it, right? And so that people are better, we're inherent coalition builders. With that said, the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn was to trust myself. Because I think that our biggest challenge and our biggest naysayer and our biggest critic is going to be ourselves. And I hate myself when I fail, because I know I could have done something different, and I'll run through the scenarios of how I could have done better. And when it's been a big failure, right? And I'm talking, the kids today, we deal with big, lasting, heavy things, right? And it's a lot for young people to carry. And the thing is it's okay to forgive yourself. And after you forgive yourself, trust yourself. And after you trust yourself, when you can get there, empower yourself. Take those risks. Be unapologetic in the ground that you walk on, because when you tap into that power, the earth shakes and the universe responds. And the law of attraction is that you'll attract other powerful energies, other positive energies. So love yourself and trust yourself. And when that happens, celebrate your wins, because you're so worthy of being celebrated.
A lot of times we think about leadership as this thing that we are connected to by those that came before us, those that have yet to come.
Yes.
But the thing that we do often see is this gap of how do people get connected to leaders, to mentors. So I'd love if you could share a story about how you got connected to your personal mentors and what advice you would have for other people.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would say is, honestly, we're experiencing collective trauma right now. Whether you're old, whether you're brand new, or somewhere in between, we're all at risk here. And I don't believe in leadership yesterday, and I don't believe in leadership tomorrow. I believe in leadership right now. And so when I walk into a space and I know what I need to do. And when I'm listening to other people and I'm recognizing a need, I'm looking for helpers, because the world is full of helpers. And helpers have to self-identify. But that wasn't your question. Your question was, how did I get tapped into my mentors? How do I find people who have helped show me what strong leadership looks like? And I have the deep, deep blessing of having been raised in Seattle by some of the most righteous advocates for civil rights I never even knew existed, what was going on, even in my own kitchen. I mean, crawling around at the table and, an open door policy out of your home, which we joke now is a community center, right? Like, that's what we need, is we need safe spaces where we can have real conversations and do it in a way that is comfortable and authentic, and doesn't lose the edge of humanity. And yes, we need to take it into more formal settings where we're sitting across the table from people and making tough demands or making tough decisions about what resourcing and legislation looks like. But also, who are the people that we serve, and who are the people that we're working with to get there? I have the sincere blessing of having learned from aunties and from uncles, and you hear their words, because, like my mom said, you learn everything the hard way. You don't necessarily have to, but the reason why it's so important to listen to your elders is because history repeats itself. It doesn't just, happen again. It evolves into a newer, uglier monster, but then again, so do we. We have everything that we need to take on headstrong the challenges of the world today. We have the heart, we have the resources, and we have the wisdom. So take note, the world is full of helpers and lessons.
When you say that we have all the resources we need to address the problems we have right now, can you share a bit more about that?
Seattle is a port city, and I don't think that everybody quite understands the privilege and the power of just the fact that we stand right here at the city of Seattle. We have people coming from all over the earth, all over the world in search of opportunity, good-willed people with nothing but energy and hope to give, right? That's why they show up. It's for opportunity. And with them, they bring diversity in experiences and knowledge and technology and cultural customs. How are we tapping into that collective wisdom in order to make the world a more vibrant place? And so when we're talking about resources, we also have to talk about barriers to accessing those resources, because there are also systemic structures that serve as gates and hoarders of what we have come to define in a capitalistic society as wealth, of what we've attached superficial values to. But an understanding to navigate that is where so much of where equity work comes in, because there are basic barriers to understanding how to overcome or navigate some of those systems. And so we really have to be able to address that in order to understand what true empowerment and thriving really looks like for everybody and not just a select few.
What do you think is most promising about Seattle specifically, as someone who is born and raised and has been here, for as long as you have, and having seen the ways in which our city has grown? What do you feel continues to give you hope?
Of course, it's the people, right? Like, it's community. I live for community. Community is what it's always been the baseline for survival, for achievement, identity, for yeah. I mean, I get asked that question a lot, and it's just so hard to put into words because you have to know Seattle to love Seattle. You have to love Seattle in order to serve Seattle. There's beauty and meaning in everything that you look, and there's so much immensity in the souls of people. It's the people, without a doubt.
Because there is so much strength in our community already, as you've spoken about, I think oftentimes we don't talk about the power of everyday people. And so with that, when we think about what it looks like to build a stronger Seattle, what do you think about that in terms of like the everyday person and knowing what it means to actually make a difference each day, whether you're working that typical 9-to-5 job or whether you're working evenings or whatever it may be, right? How do we each know that we're making a difference?
Everybody is their own revolution, right? And everybody has a way of contributing to that. Some people knock doors, right? Some people write checks. Some people write policy. Some people show up and continue to be a source of good energy. Some people, care for animals or tend the earth. But everybody, as long as they're doing what they know resonates with them, is good and true, the world needs more of that. And acts can be big and they can be small. They could be visible or they can be invisible. But there's so much to be said for goodwill, and there's so much to be said for love and respect for other people, and respect for their agency to do their good works without infringing upon their ability to do that with agency. And so I would just say that, in big and small ways, people know that that they're doing the work.
Okay, so I'm sure you can attest to this. Working in politics can be very deeply personal, which also means that at times it can be very exhausting. It can lead you sometimes to question purpose. And I'd love to hear what you do to take care of yourself, to recharge, to make sure that you feel inspired to bring your best self in service to others, and what your words of advice would be to other young folks or women of color who are looking to do similar advocacy work in this space.
Thank you so much for your question, and unequivocally the answer is women. I build powerhouse safety nets for myself of women, because the thing that drains me about the world today, and it's not just me, there is such a threat and attack on our agency, and the world that we move through is volatile, and we experience that in a visceral way. It gets a visceral reaction out of us, and so you layer off not just how the world is, but then on top of that, working in an industry where by and large I'm gonna be the youngest and I'm gonna be one of the only women of color in the room. One of the first things I did when I first got a job in the state legislature, and I'm so grateful to this woman, but she sought me out and she said, "My office is a safe place for you." And that was so very important. But it's this sisterhood, and we talk about it amongst ourselves too. That sisterhood is just this key word that floats around, and it's one of those words that we have a relationship and really think about and we treasure, because without the women, it would be easy to get jaded or overwhelmed or emotionally drained. So very much look for the sisters, look for the people that you can be honest and authentically yourself with and find safe spaces in where you go. The other thing is you have every right to be everywhere that you are. It is just as much your space as it is somebody else's. And I think oftentimes, and we hear especially women and people of color working in what these historically male and white male jobs is the imposter syndrome. And that I feel like I have to change and just be more formal. And what I realized is you can't fake it till you make it. If I fake the funk, then I'm not carving out the space so that other people like me feel more comfortable stepping into that space. And it's actually not my job to make other people more comfortable. And I'm not sent there to conform. I'm there to reform and revolutionize. And so I think being authentically yourself is, it's what's required of us in service positions, and it can also be fatiguing because you're going to meet resistance with that, and people will try and shove you back into a box of what's more comfortable for them, but find the women. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
So given that you're an industry that's mostly male-dominated, conservatively male-dominated, that views women and women with tattoos especially in a negative view, how do you break their views of how they stereotype you? And then the other question is, how do you learn leadership in that kind of environment? I
am who and how I am. My tattoos certainly aren't going anywhere. And, you know, and people, they're going to have their perceptions about things. My mom taught me early, success is its own best revenge. You just keep showing up and you keep performing and you can't argue with results. So you know who you are, and you know what's great about you, and you know what you need to do, and you certainly know how to deliver results. And never once before have I let something as superficial as what somebody thought about my tattoos slow me down. And, you know, if I think coupling that is also just respect. I'm not trying to say that me not being impacted by somebody else's perceptions of what professionalism should look like does not mean that I disrespect you. It just means that I'm not going to sell that piece of my agency away. How do I find leadership in spaces where there are very few people who are like me? Honestly, I take people as who and how they are on a human level. And I think from every single common denominator in humanity, we can identify things in somebody that we can like. And as somebody who comes from the experience of being bullied, where I felt like I was all by myself and nobody liked me, the way I got through that experience was by saying, if they talked to me, we would find something that we could agree on, if they gave me a chance. And that's how I move through the world. And I think that's also what's so crucial in politics too, is looking for the places where we can agree and building upon those.
This is the first of our series here at 21 Progress. Like I said before, you will see this on social media, so Facebook, Instagram, we'll be taking pieces of it moving forward. The other thing that you will experience, just because our organization is really committed to engagement, is that we hope that you will make sure that you've signed up and make sure that we have your email address, because we plan on following up. So if you didn't get a question answered, or if you would love to see a different speaker for the next few series, that we can know who you're interested in, as well as what came up for you. So I just want to thank you folks so much, and I hope that with the comments that you made about empowerment, as well as the comments that you made about all of us belonging, which is I think what democracy is all about. It's not about who's in power, but it's actually that we are the power, right? That's the notion behind it. That this series can be maybe an opportunity for us to have those conversations explicitly so we can get more and more comfortable. Here at 21 Progress, we oftentimes talk about joy and justice, and that we really don't want any kind of justice that doesn't have joy, and we don't think that there can be any joy if there isn't justice. And so with that, I hope you enjoy your experience. Thank you so much to Ambassador Stories and the Seattle Neighborhood Matching Fund for supporting this work, and I hope you folks continue to share our work with others. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, you guys.